With such a disparity in manpower and guns, the presence of federal troops, plus their frequent patrols and arrests of Confederate sympathizers, made armed insurgencies on the West Coast nearly impossible. Some militants certainly tried, but the California Volunteers, sometimes with the help of the state militia, confronted Confederate and pro-Confederate partisans in multiple known Copperhead strongholds, from El Monte to the San Bernardino Mountains, and from Sacramento to Portland. As the tide gradually turned decidedly against secession throughout 1861, Senator Latham abandoned his talk of seceding and publicly became a Union man. He was a notorious Breckinridge Democrat who'd openly advocated for secession of the Pacific Coast states. But he was also a politician who wanted to keep political power and his job, who had no prospects in the Confederacy if he were to defect. Because Senator Latham ultimately stayed loyal to the Union, there was a federal army camp named after him in Southern California, Camp Latham. After several volunteer regiments were raised and drilled in California, a series of army forts were hastily built across Oregon and the Washington Territory. These new fortifications likely had less to do with the Indian Wars in the region than with the op-eds appearing in Canadian newspapers calling for Canadians on the West Coast to join the American secessionists in the Northwest to fight for the Pacific Republic and bring it under British protection. To further strengthen the Union and weaken the Southern Democrats in Oregon, Lincoln signed a bill in 1862 that partially funded both a telegraph line and a railroad connecting Oregon with the East Coast. The bill also called for the state of Oregon and for private investors to put up part of the money for the railroad and the telegraph line. This was an economic shot in the arm that created new jobs in Oregon and eastern Washington, today's Idaho, and connected the citizens of that remote region with the rest of the United States. It also made citizens who might have supported Pacific independence into stakeholders in the Union. Unsurprisingly, Senator Joseph Lane, who was a Southern Democrat and rabidly anti-Lincoln, unsuccessfully but passionately fought against the bill tooth and nail. After California deployed its first regiments, the War Department asked the governor of Oregon to raise volunteer troops as well. Thus, the 1st Oregon Volunteer Cavalry Regiment was born. The regiment would be chronically understrength throughout the whole war, same as the 1st Oregon Infantry. But the Oregon Volunteers still fought in the Indian Wars alongside California troops, shut down several pro-Confederate newspapers around Oregon, and occasionally arrested local secessionists. With their own people now in uniform, citizens of Oregon had another reason to feel like stakeholders in the Union war effort. But the movement for secession on the West Coast persisted. In response, the Oregon State Legislature passed a series of resolutions in support of President Lincoln and the Union in September 1862. One of their resolutions specifically rejected that Oregon should secede from the United States. And to the proposed Pacific Republic, the legislature declared, quote, "The emphatic condemnation of the people of Oregon, and we denounce it as a development of treason favored by no man who has intelligence and patriotism," unquote. 18 months later, on March 5, 1864, the telegraph line connecting Washington, D.C. to Portland, Oregon was completed. The first telegraph sent back east was from Governor Gibbs to President Lincoln. The wire from Portland read, "Our telegraph completed. Let the Great Pacific Railroad with a branch to Oregon soon follow. We want no Pacific Republic, no compromise with rebels in arms, and no more slavery." Most rebels and rebel sympathizers had accepted by the end of 1861 that California and Oregon were staying in the Union, though some diehards clung to the dream even longer. Thousands of Southerners living on the West Coast had gone back east, by land and by sea, to join the Confederate Army, while other militants, especially the Knights of the Golden Circle, dreamed up new ways to pull California out of the Union. In the summer of 1864, when it was more than abundantly clear that there would be no Pacific Republic, around 50 Knights joined a homegrown Confederate militia, Captain Rufus Henry Ingram's Partisan Rangers. The volunteers were local recruits, but Captain Ingram was a veteran of Quantrill's band in Missouri, now a Confederate officer sent from back east to get gold for the Confederacy and disrupt the Union war effort. The Partisans waged a 2-month-long guerrilla war that blazed a path from the Sierra Nevada to the outskirts of San Jose. One of the volunteers in the Partisan Ranger Band was George Cross, the Mexican war veteran who served under John C. Fremont, participated in the Bear Flag Revolt, and was there when the Bear Flag was raised over Sonoma. Cross was a firm believer of secession and doubtlessly supported the Pacific Republic when it was still plausible. His joining the guerrilla band confirms not only his membership in either the Knights of the Golden Circle or Knights of the Columbia Star, but also that the spirit of the Bear Flag Revolt still lived on in the West Coast. On July 14, 1864, Captain Ingram's Partisan Rangers fought their last gun battle just outside of San Jose. 2 bushwhackers were killed, others wounded, and multiple rebels captured. Captain Ingram escaped and followed a rat line all the way back to Missouri, where he laid low for the rest of the war. George Cross survived the Civil War despite having been a Confederate guerrilla, terribly outnumbered in a Union state. Deputy Commander Tom Poole was executed by hanging at the Placerville Gallows in October 1865. He was executed for 2 reasons. First, he'd already been paroled for an earlier rebel plot a year before he joined the Partisan Rangers. Second, he was captured after a gunfight in which a deputy sheriff was killed, and he was the ranking rebel the police captured from the band. Several other California bushwhackers got prison sentences, but surprisingly, most of them were acquitted on legal technicalities, and it's likely that Cross was one of the men who got off the hook. While the Pacific Republic had been defeated mostly through political means, the Confederacy's tiny branch in California was defeated by gunfire. So ends the story of the nation that nearly was. Thank you for watching the Civil War Wild West Edition, and if you haven't already done so, please hit like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel. See you in hell, Johnny Reb.